Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first edition of NazScar, where we talk all mid-major college hoops. Glad to have you along. My name is Nick Pierce, and we're joined by our experts, Tim Scarborough, or Scar, and Paul Nazigan, Naz. Together, they are NazScar. Also, our producer, engineer, Shaq Cook, with us here this week. Glad to have you on board. We got a lot to get to, including former assistant men's basketball coach Jeff Meyer just called it quits this year after a long, successful career. Jeff Meyer will be joining us a little bit later on in the show to talk hoops and who knows what else. All right, guys, let's get into it. The starting five. Let's get going. And this one is one of a little bit of a controversy or contention, I guess, if you will. First off, guys, why would you not consider Gonzaga a mid-major?
Well, to me, it's quite simple, Nick. I mean, Gonzaga for the last 20 to 25 years has been simply playing on a national level. When you look at the fact that since 1999, Mark Few has been the head coach, and he's never had a losing season. He's been to the Elite Eight. He's been to the Final Four. He was this close to winning a national championship in 2017. So many players in the NBA and All-Americans, Dan Dickau, Adam Morrison, Kelly Olynyk, Ruchi Hachimura, drafted last year by the Washington Wizards. They're a team that plays on a national level. And by the way, last year, they were in the top two most of the year, top five, certainly. And this year, they're number one in the country, and they don't look like a team that will be beat anytime soon. And to me, Jalen Suggs, a five-star recruit, is one of the best players they've ever had, and he's certainly probably the best player in the nation right now. So many reasons why we are not going to consider them when we talk about our NazScar top 25.
Yeah, Scar, you're right. Like, and not only are they getting those guys, but who are they competing against to get those guys? And they are not competing against mid-major programs. They're competing against the high major programs to get those recruits. I mean, if you ask Gonzaga who they are, I mean, they're going to tell you they're a high major program. That's what they're telling their recruits. They're not selling their recruits when they come on campus. Hey, we get to play Santa Clara twice a year. They are selling their non-conference schedule because it's all Kentucky and Kansas and Duke.
Yeah, they're a major playing in a mid-major conference.
Yeah.
That's just life. They're a big fish in a small pond.
That's right.
And in a mid-major arena as well, but you got to love the kennel. That place gets loud. It's got some bark to it. Let's move on here. Number two in our starting five. A lot of mid-major upsets early on here, just in the first week and a half of play. Looking up and down the college basketball landscape, a wild 4-overtime game in Atlanta. There's a lot to talk about here. Naz, I'll start with you. What jumps out to you and why?
Well, just keeping it local here in Virginia, San Francisco, great win, very surprising over UVA. And then my boys Liberty on there twice. You know, they beat Mississippi State, also beat South Carolina and other great ones. But I think you're seeing that experience and returners have a little bit of an advantage under all these conditions, beating youth and talent.
And I'm going to take my guy Naz's cue, and I'm going to go local as well. I live in the Atlanta area. And to me, I watched both these games because I covered Georgia State and Mercer last week on ESPN+. So I had to prepare for them. But I got to watch them upset my guy, Josh Pastner, in Atlanta. They both beat Georgia Tech. And that 123-124 overtime win, I'll be honest, I only saw two of those overtimes. And I came back later, and it was a fourth overtime. But what a performance. And then Mercer, really one of the better mid-major teams in the country.
Yeah.
Greg Gary, second year down there as a former assistant under Matt Painter at Purdue. He has done a tremendous amount of quality recruiting, and he's done it the way most people are doing it these days with transfers and fifth-year guys. Mercer is going to make some noise this year, but already, as with most years, the Power Fives are losing to what we call mid-majors, and it's going to keep happening because the talent disparity is not what it was 30 to 35 years ago.
That's right.
Yeah, no doubt about that. But fortunately for your guy, Josh Pastner, he does now have a win over Kentucky under his belt this year to kind of
He did make up
That's
for
right.
a double-digit win.
Yeah, no doubt. Kind of wash some of that bad taste out of the mouth. Moving on, number three in our starting five, best mid-major conference in America. Scar, who do you got?
Well, to me, if you want to count the Atlantic 10 as a mid-major, and to me, when we say mid-major, when I say we, me and Naz, mid-majors are the non-Power Fives, and then don't count the American Athletic and we don't count the Big East. So that's 7 conferences. Everybody else is pretty much in that next group. And the Atlantic 10 is right there. Dayton was a top 5 team all last year. They had the National Player of the Year in Obi Toppin, a lottery pick. They had the National Coach of the Year for Anthony Grant. But then you think about VCU, George Mason have both been in the Final Four in the last decade. Okay, George Mason was 2006, so that's a little bit longer. And they weren't 8 Atlantic 10 teams, but we're still counting them. Then Davidson, right. When you add VCU, George Mason, and Davidson to an already really good conference, and the coaching in that league, I mean, Keith Dambrot at Duquesne is one of the best coaches in the country to me. Mark Schmidt at St. Bonaventure. There's no easy games night in and night out. Even when you play LaSalle or St. Joe's, you go into Philadelphia, you're probably not going to leave with a win. So to me, that's obviously the Atlantic 10.
Yeah, I cannot disagree with you, Scar, there. And, in the number 2 slot, I guess, I was torn. The SoCon is really good. Scar, you cover some of those games too. I mean, Greensboro, Furman, Mercer, but so we got to give them some love. But I'm going to go with the West Coast Conference. And here's why. Even after you take out the team whose name we will not mention on this show anymore, is you still got some great teams in there. BYU had everybody back, and also they get the transfer kid, the big kid Harms from Purdue. St. Mary's, every year they're tough. They're going to be back right in the mix again. We talked about earlier about San Francisco knocking off UVA. They're going to have a good year. And then even Pepperdine. You got Coach Romar out there making some waves out there in the California. So I think WCC is really strong.
And I agree with you. I mean, the WCC, because when you're a coach in that league, you have a recruiting tool. You say, listen, we're competing with Gonzaga. And as a result, you have to go after players that Gonzaga is going after. So as a result, everybody's level of play has been elevated. So yeah, I agree with you. But to me, Atlantic 10 is 1, WCC is right there in the Mountain West, and the SoCon, all good leagues.
Yeah.
So Gonzaga can't claim mid-major status, but all those other schools can claim Gonzaga for their recruiting status.
Correct.
Fair enough. Well, let's move on. Number 4 in our starting 5. A great poet from Brooklyn once said, just give me one more chance. So there's some coaches out there that are saying the exact same thing. Rick Pitino's already gotten his at Iona. Greg Marshall's going to be asking for one more chance somewhere. Scar, how do you feel about giving one more chance to some of these guys?
Well, first, let me just say, Greg Marshall, what he's accused of doing is a no-no. You don't want to abuse players and coaches. We've been around Greg a lot. We like him. He's a good friend of ours. But, reality is, when he was at Winthrop, he won a lot of games. He rubbed some people the wrong way. He did a great job at Wichita, got them to the national championship Final Four in 2013. So, obviously he's one of the best coaches in the nation. Took Wichita to the American Athletic. Wichita's a team that was a mid-major. Now we got to say they're a major, and it's all due in part to Greg Marshall. But I love that Rick Pitino is back in college basketball. I know he's older now, and his son Ricky is coaching out in Minnesota. So he's kind of passed that baton. But this last go around, look for Iona. Remember, Rick's a New York guy. You talk about give me one more chance, Biggie. Ricky is going to give us one more chance. And I'm telling you, Iona is going to be really good, if not this year, certainly next year. And I love the Gales. I love Gale Nation and TBT. I'm excited about what they're going to do up in New Rochelle.
Yeah, in both these cases, time heals all wounds. And, you're seeing Pitino, he kind of left the spotlight for a while, and people kind of just tend to remember the good things. And I think the fact that he comes back to a mid-major, it kind of helps people say, okay, he's kind of been humbled. He's paying his dues. Again, he may not be there long till he ascends again, but it's nice to see him back in. And then, so Greg Marshall needs to do the same thing. He needs to kind of lay low for a while and kind of regather himself. I'll tell you, listen, he needs to seek counsel. That's not legal counsel. He needs to seek the counsel from his mentors.
Yep.
He was at College of Charleston under one of the best of all time, John Kress. And, he needs to kind of reach out to the people that helped him and kind of own up what it was and kind of make some changes. Listen, the changes are not unfixable. Some really bad things happened allegedly, but listen, it's not like he's saying, look, I don't know how I'm going to coach if I can't punch somebody or shake a kid. Like,
sure,
those are fixable. And again, we all have personality things and things in our lives that we may need to kind of learn and grow from. And I'm telling you, Greg Marshall, he'll be able to do that. Nobody would ever ask him not to coach kids hard. Listen, there's a lot of coaches up and down any level that coach kids hard. There are kids that love that. There are families that want their kids in really, I mean, look at Frank Martin at South Carolina. Don't tell me he's not on kids, but listen, they love him. There's a way to do that. And if Greg can kind of tweak his style a little bit, I think he'll be back.
He'll be back, but listen, he's got 7 million reasons why he doesn't need to be back.
Yeah. He may not be in a rush to get back, but he'll be back.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt Greg Marshall to lay low for a little while, but I also think that it's going to depend because this is such a fresh situation, guys. I mean, wouldn't you agree? I mean, we still don't maybe know the depths to which this goes or for even how long it's gone on or what stops that he's been on. So I think that, there could be a little bit of a unknown here as far as, before we know if Greg Marshall can get that second chance, right?
That's correct. True. But he'll get a second chance if he wants it because he's too good of a coach not to be back in basketball at some point.
Let's move on to the final piece of our starting five, the five, if you will. COVID-19, the elephant in the room. It's had the biggest impact on all of sports this year. College basketball, no different. Naz, I'll start with you. Preparation in light of COVID-19, mental preparation, the mentality overall of your team. How is it affected in a year like this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things are up in the air. And so you mentioned sort of maturity. I think the teams that have older guys that sort of can kind of handle some of these inconveniences a little better are going to come out on top. I think you really just try to live day to day and not get ahead of yourself too much. I mean, you really have to kind of shrink instead of having this big picture day to day, maybe week to week, but you keep your kids living in the moment. And then I think you're going to see teams like who wants it the most? I mean, games are being canceled already. Scriver, how many have been canceled?
Over 50 games have been canceled, Naz. And then you think about the coaches are getting on the phone and say, hey, can you meet me at a gym tomorrow? Virginia Tech and Villanova played a game 17 hours after their coaches got together. And unfortunately for Jay Wright, ended up being a Virginia Tech win.
That's right.
Tech is a little bit better than what people thought, thanks in part to Keve Aluma, a Wofford transfer. And of course, you and I got to coach his dad at Liberty, Peter Aluma. But I tell you what, getting these games and getting prepared, the teams that have older players are going to be ready. Think about Kentucky. They're struggling a little bit. Why? They have 12 underclassmen. And the two guys that are older are transfers. Mintz came from Creighton, and Olivier Sarr came from Wake Forest. Good players, but they haven't even played together. A lot of these guys have been in COVID protocols. They haven't had a chance to really gel. So this is just a really odd year. I would hate to have to be prepping my team in COVID-19 conditions.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see the teams that are disciplined, it's going to pay off for them. Like, who's going to say, look, I'll wear a mask. I'm staying healthy. What teams are going to say, hey, we're not going to go out to parties. We want to be healthy and play games and stay on the court. So that's going to be interesting to watch who can kind of keep themselves on track.
That'll wrap it up for the starting five. Let's get on now to the top 25, and that is our mid-major top 25 here from NazScar this week. And we'll start with the top 10. San Diego State checking in at number 1, still unbeaten at 4-0, followed by Richmond and St. Mary's. Then it's Dayton and Western Kentucky. Big Red rounding out the top 5 there. St. Louis at number 6. Then it's San Francisco, Boise State, and BYU and Nevada rounding out the top 10. Looking at 13 through 25, some good ball clubs in there as well. Mercer checking in at number 16. You heard Scar mention them a little while ago. They're unbeaten at 5-0. Winthrop, former Greg Marshall coached team, and in the Big South, off to a good start at 2-0. Grand Canyon winding things out there. 3 unbeaten teams, 23 through 25 here. I'm interested to get your guys' take. Let's go back here in the top 10, the top 12 here. And let's start out with San Diego State. Scar, why do you love the Aztecs this year?
Well, obviously they lost Malachi Flynn, an NBA first rounder at 29, but they have plenty left in the tank. They are 4-0 this year well-coached team. They're going to win a whole lot of games. And again, they're competing on a national level. So they're an obvious choice at number one.
At number two, we love Richmond. Listen, there's a lot of reasons. Scar, me and Scar, Philly guys. Mooney's a Philly guy. We go back with him a little bit, so he got some love going on there. But he is really doing a great job. This is a team that had 24 wins a year ago. They got everybody back.
Yep.
That system. And again, I think that's huge. And the Kentucky win, you got guys that know the system, came in and executed that. Again, as Scar mentioned, the A-10 is without question the toughest mid-major conference. They are picked to win it. They're already making national news, 19th in the country on the national scale. So,
yeah, and Naz, Jacob Gilliard, their 5'9"
Yes.
guard, is brilliant. And Grant Golden, a fifth-year guy. You got guys who have played in Chris Mooney's system for 5 years. That's a tough scenario to guard, especially for Coach Calipari with his young players. And we saw it. They struggled with that team. But Richmond is going to be on the national scale all year long. I'm looking forward to watching them play once again.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Richmond at 2-0, and it seems like everyone's making a name off John Calipari here the first couple of weeks of the season, unfortunately for Coach Cal. But looking at the rest of the top 10 here, Western Kentucky, Scar, that's a team that I watched play on Thanksgiving. I was thoroughly impressed with them.
Oh, that's a team that I cover a lot. I've been to Western Kentucky more than people want to see me at this point. I need to get some talk about stock right now. So I need to get some stock in Bowling Green, Kentucky. But Rick Stansbury has had good teams in the recent history. You know, when I look at Western Kentucky, they're built like an SEC team to me. Charles Bassey is an NBA prospect. Now in his redshirt sophomore year, he got hurt early last year. He thought about going pro after his freshman year and came back, and he got hurt. So now he had to come back again to prove himself once again. But Carson Williams, a 6'5" power forward, and to me, Tavion Hollingsworth, one of the better point guards in the nation. And now he's a 4-year starter. You know, he's had some 30-point games that I've had the privilege of calling. I really like that Western Kentucky team.
Yeah, and checking in at number 11, the Liberty Flames. I don't want to get too far into the weeds on them yet, Naz. We're going to talk more about them in a minute. But looking at 13 through 25, Scar, come back to you. Mercer, a team that you've seen quite a bit down there in the state of Georgia. What about the Bears this year? 5-0. They for real?
They are for real, and I'll tell you why. I mentioned Greg Gary, a top assistant at under Matt Painter at Purdue, and Purdue is one of the better teams in the country. You think about 2019, they were a Diakite shot away from advancing in the Elite Eight, and maybe Purdue goes on to win the final, win the national championship. And he didn't bring many players with him, but he does have some fifth-year guys and some transfer guys, and they have really put together a nice team, a team I get to cover this season, and I'm excited for Mercer Bears this season.
Also, Georgia State checking in there at number 17. Naz, get your thoughts on Winthrop off to a 2-0 start. You've seen Winthrop teams from the past play a lot. What about this Winthrop team in 2020?
Yeah, I think they just are, continuing. Coach Kelsey he seems to have a great squad every year. But listen, they had their dancing shoes laced up last year, and the whole thing.
They get a dance.
Down, but
yeah,
listen, they got that whole group back. They're picked to win the Big South. They've got a win over some good teams already. But I just love how they play. They play hard. They play tough. And Coach Kelsey just seems to have them peaking always at the right time. So I like him right in there at number 19.
Yeah, Winthrop with a win over UNC Greensboro already this year. Got another win over Little Rock as well. Looking at Belmont and Furman, a couple other teams wanted to hit on here. Naz, why do you like Belmont? Why do you like Furman?
Yeah, Belmont, Casey Alexander, he was doing a great job at Lipscomb in the A-Sun, and he takes the job following his mentor, Rick Byrd. What a great program. And it's been seamless. He has them rolling 3-1 already. Furman, we mentioned SoCon is really going to be tough this year. Furman, they got a kid, Noah Gurley, who will probably vie for Player of the Year in the SoCon. Coach Bob Ritchie doing a great job, just one of these up-and-coming young guys.
Yeah.
Great job year after year for Furman.
And the SoCon has produced a couple of really nice coaches. We talked about Virginia Tech. Mike Young was the head coach at Wofford, took Keve Aluma with them to Virginia Tech, and now they're rolling. I look for Wake Forest with Steve Forbes leaving ETSU, taking over that job. Look for Wake Forest to start kind of moving up in the ranks in the ACC in the next years to come too. So a really good league. And, there's certainly enough young coaches in that league to keep it going.
So there you have it. That's our top 25 here this week on NASDAQ. We'll check in again next week and see how everyone fares. All right, well, next up on the show, we want to welcome in this week's special guest. He's been to 2 Final Fours as an assistant coach with Michigan. As a head coach, he guided Liberty to its very first NCAA tournament appearance, and he was most recently an assistant at Butler. Well, now he's taken off the tie, he's hung up the jacket, and we're talking about retired coach Jeff Meyer. He's this week's guest on NazScar.
All right, now we are here with former Liberty head basketball coach for 17 seasons, went to the NCAAs in 1994 for the first time at Liberty, worked for Greg Marshall at Winthrop, spent with Quinn Snyder at Missouri, Todd Lichter at Butler, Kelvin Sampson at IU, 10 years with John Beilein, including a Final Four appearance in Atlanta back in 2013, and is now retired from Butler, a second stint under LaVall Jordan. So I want you guys to welcome Coach Jeff Meyer, a guy I play for and Paul Naziget play for. Coach, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Scar. It's great to be with you and Naz. And wow, you guys are doing a really cool thing here with the podcast.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you joining. This is our inaugural show. So we wanted the guy that we know the best, the guy who really kind of helped us carve our career.
That's
we
right.
both played for you. We both coached with you on staff. And Naz was actually with you when you went to that first round against North Carolina. But before we start talk about some of the Liberty days, talk a little bit about I'm always interested in coaching relationships. I know you and John Beilein go way back. Talk about that relationship, when he was at Richmond, you were at Liberty, and then how you guys got to work together for a decade.
Yeah, Scar, we had in Charlotte, North Carolina, Division I coaches had a forum in October of, I want to say 1994, and we had just gone to the tournament. So it was the following fall, and Coach Beilein and I met in a workout room. And, from that point in time, we went, we had a meal together. We spent a couple of hours together. He was a tremendous offensive skill development guy. So we tried to take as much from him as I could at that point in time. And then we talked a lot about our defense at Liberty. We had a pretty good run at holding opponents under 40% field goal percentage. And we became friends. And then, when he was at Richmond, I was at Liberty. We got to know each other quite well. And then, obviously, a number of years later, that comes full circle when, we had a situation at Indiana kind of go south. And it ended up that John invited me to come up to Michigan. And that was kind of how it began. And we spent 10 quality years together. We had a lot of fun and had some really good teams at Michigan.
So close to winning that national championship 2013. But that Final Four is fun. I was there with you guys. I got to go to the shoot around on the Friday. I was really proud to see you in the midst of that. But you had kind of you established yourself in the business when you mentioned you worked for Kelvin Sampson at IU. That IU team, that last one you had 2 NBA stars really. And Eric Gordon Jr. and Jordan as well, Jordan Crawford. Talk a little bit about some of those guys as well as some of the guys you coached at Michigan that are in the NBA today.
Well, interesting enough, during that early years at Liberty, I coached a young man named Eric Gordon Sr.
Right.
And I had no idea then, but he and his wife, Denise, both Liberty alums, landed back home in Indianapolis. And a few years later, they have EJ, and that's Eric Gordon Jr. And, we just became, my wife Karen and I became family friends. And so that Indiana team was a really talented team. DJ White was, first team All Big Ten player. We had EJ, who was a tremendous, he was, what I call a pro at the prom. He was going to be a pro when he was in high school. And we had the good fortune of just kind of nurturing him for a year there. And you mentioned Jordan Crawford, who was really long, talented, athletic kid, and we had a really good team. And that was, but it was really kind of a difficult transition because we didn't get to finish that season with Coach Sampson for reasons I'm sure your listeners all are aware of. But that was almost another lifetime ago. Still great friends with Eric Sr. and EJ, and proud of what he has done with the Rockets. And of course, Eric Sr. is running the EG10 teaching academy here in Indianapolis, and we get together periodically.
Nice.
Coach, let's keep it in the Big Ten here for a little bit longer. You know, your time at IU and then your time in Michigan. Just talk a little bit about how incredible, how difficult, the coaching night after night in the Big Ten against top coaches, top teams. I mean, arguably one of the best conferences every year. I mean, what's that like? I mean, at times it's probably a dream. At times it's probably a nightmare. But, you know, talk about that experience. It had to be incredible.
Yeah, Naz, it was, it was really good. I go all the way back to when I got into coaching.
That's right.
Before Liberty, I was at Purdue for 2 years. And
that's right.
Back then it was 10 schools in the Big Ten. And, that's kind of tipped off my Big Ten experience. But both Indiana and Michigan, we Big Ten night, it's a dogfight, if you will. It's a slugfest, if it's will. It's a physical league. The thing that's unique, of course, I've coached in the Big 12 at Missouri, and there were some really talented players in the Big 12 at that time, and also now in the Big East with Butler. But the thing that separates the Big Ten in my mind is the on-campus environment that you walk into every place you go. It's sold out every place you go. The campuses, because of the tradition, rich tradition, the campuses live for their football team, their basketball teams. And that's the one thing is really, you talk about how physical it is, how competitive it is. It's really tough to go into some of these venues, whether it's Carver Hawkeye Arena in Iowa City or the Breslin at Michigan State, Assembly Hall, Mackey Arena at Purdue. Hard to go into those places and come out with a W. So when you do, you feel really, really good about life and about your team. And we had a couple of those teams at Michigan that we could take just about anywhere and feel pretty good in the locker room, even before the game, that the outcome of the game was going to be favorable to the Wolverines. But that was, it was just, that was the thing that's unique about the Big Ten is the home court advantages that you have because of the fan base, the student support that is in every school. I think about going to Cole Fieldhouse, Wisconsin. They love their Badgers up there. You go to the barn in Minnesota. They love their Gophers there, and it's across the board. It's that way in the Big Ten.
Yeah, but now I mean, you coach so many, guys end up being pros.
Yeah,
like Karis LeVert, Trey Burke.
Yeah.
Mitch McGarry, and a lot of those guys. I don't think you probably thought they were going to be pros when they came in. Trey Burke was very under-recruited guy, right? I mean, he was a Columbus kid that Ohio State didn't even want, really. Matt Stauskas, Hardaway Jr., Glenn Robinson Jr. I mean, talk about the development and then talk about how the game has evolved. I mean, you mentioned how physical the Big Ten is and was, but the game is very finesse today, right? I mean, the guys we just mentioned, a lot of them are very skilled basketball players, skilled with the ball, pushing, spotting up, running to the three-point line. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the players that you mentioned there, of course, Trey Burke, our ability to land him at Michigan kind of was initiated through a friend of ours, Rick Burby.
Yeah, Coach Burby.
Was on staff at Liberty while you were there.
Yeah.
And Rick had helped many, many years ago, Trey's dad, Benji, into a college environment. And because of Rick's friendship, he lives right there in Columbus, we were able to get involved in the recruitment process. And ultimately, because Ohio State, they had kind of their squad, we're not going to offer Trey. He couldn't think of a better place to go than Michigan, so he could turn around and beat Ohio State. So he was that kind of guy. He was cold-blooded now. He was a tremendous competitor, winner, and easy
But
to
a
coach.
one and done? Did you think he was a one and done?
You know, he did 2 years. I didn't think he was.
Did he do so?
I thought he
Okay.
would be a good 4-year player.
Yeah.
But, you know, he did after the first year, you know, we actually tied for Big Ten championship his freshman year, and then his sophomore year, that's when we took it all the way to Monday night. But, you know, guys like Nick Stauskas, Tim Hardaway Jr., those guys really gave our coaching staff, let's say gave me, but gave our coaching staff energy. These guys, and you've been around these kind of, they're like you guys. I mean, they had positive mindsets. They had great work ethics. They were tremendous team guys. And, you know, I think about Glenn Robinson, Jr., Mitch McGarry, both of those kids I recruited out of the region. They call it the region in Northwest Indiana. And they were just guys that loved basketball, were passionate about their team. And, you know, when you got those qualities in you, you do get better. And Coach Beeline was tremendous with skill development. You know, I've had, as you mentioned, the pleasure of working with some really, really good basketball coaches. No one is more passionate about skill development than John Beeline. I mean, it was every day that we practiced, which is 6 days a week. And we used every minute of every week. And skill development was a big priority every day with those guys. And so we really recruited guys who would be called gym rats. You know, we always say, you know, rats like cheese, but gym rats, they make a lot of cheese. And
all those guys do.
We were
That's
looking
right.
for guys who loved being in the gym, that were your proverbial gym rats. And of course, Trey and Tim both playing for the Mavericks last year. Karis, you know what, Scar, I was thinking, you know, Karis and you have something in common.
What's that?
Neither one of you were planning on playing your freshman year in college. And then you got into close to the season, and we needed you to play. So that was one of why did we play you when you only played like, you know, 55 minutes that year? It was a wasted year.
Whole year done.
I know you're still upset with me with that. So, but you played, and then with Karis was a redshirt candidate, but he practiced so well every day. We had Trey starting, Trey Burge. We had Nick Stauskas on the left side. We had Tim Hardaway.
Yes.
We had, you know, Jordan Morgan, Mitch McGarry. On the right side, we had Glenn Robinson. Karis wasn't going to play, except every day in practice, he did something. Like he would break ankles every day in practice with this shifty crossover, double cross, and somebody be falling down. You know what? We can be good without him. We might be able to win it all with him. And so we took the red shirt off after 3 games. He didn't even play like the first 3 games. He didn't even play. And didn't dress, didn't play. And, you know, in retrospect, one of the things we kept saying in staff meeting was, Coach Beeline, he only going to be here 4 years, because after that, he's going to go make a lot of money. So you can either play him now off the bench, or you're only going to coach him for 3 years, because that kid's coming and he will be gone from college in 4 years, which he was.
Great pro too. Great pro.
Yeah. Tremendous, tremendous young man. I think of all the players I've coached in like 40 plus years, he, at his graduation, gave the coaching staff a gift. He gave us all like a desk piece, just saying thanks. And it was just really kind of a cool thing to have a player like give you, as an assistant coach, a gift like that. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Great conversation there with Coach Meyer. If you enjoyed that, make sure you join us again next week. We will have part 2 of that sit down chat with Jeff Meyer. All right, it's time to move on to our next segment in the show. This one we like to call NASDAQ. And it is not the typical NASDAQ that you think of, although there are some similar elements. We are talking stock up, stock down. And Paul Nazigan, we will start here with the Liberty Flames. Stock up, stock down on LU.
All right, look, now when I'm talking about Liberty now, I may be getting, this may be insider information. I may get in trouble for this. But listen, with Liberty, buy. You got a lot of people had question marks because they lost 4 great seniors, iconic guys for the program, coming off 30 wins. So they're a little bit down. People had question marks, but I'm telling you, this is a great buy. Now, look, it's not an instant payback. This is something they're trending upwards. They've been trending up ever since Coach McKay got back to Lynchburg. So give it time to mature, but Liberty's a buy.
Yeah, Liberty's won 59 games over the past 2 seasons, already knocked off a couple of SEC teams this year. Moving on to the Richmond Spiders. Naz, stock up, stock down.
Yeah, Richmond Spiders, stock up, buy. Now, listen, this is one of these stocks that, look, everybody knows about, but it's still good. You know, it's like McDonald's, you know, sure, everybody's got it, or Google, but still, it's a reliable bet. They're moving up. We talked about how good they are. You can bank on them.
I don't think they're as expensive as Google yet. They're reliable, but you know it's not $1,000 a share quite yet.
Well, they're definitely more expensive than the value meal at Mickey D's. So, coming off their first ever top 10 win, we mentioned over Kentucky. All right, stock up, stock down. These one-site bubble tournaments. Naz, do you put any stock in this?
Look, this one's a watch. This is a stock watch. I think it's too early to tell about what this is going to do. At the same time, we got COVID numbers going up and we got vaccines coming out. So, I mean, I think this is a hold. Don't put too much stock in it either way. Just time will tell.
Moving on to Wes Miller, the longtime head coach at UNC Greensboro. He's in his 10th season. A little bit of a slow start this year, but 23 wins last year, 28 wins the year before that. Naz, there's talk if he has another big year this year, he could be on the move after 10 seasons at Greensboro. Stock up, stock down. Wes Miller could be newly employed next year.
Yeah, I'm selling that. I don't like that. Now, listen, Wes Miller as a coach, great guy, great job. My stock's high on him, but I don't think he moves. I think he's found a niche there, right there in the heart of Tobacco Road. He's recruiting the city. Listen, the city has embraced them. They love their basketball. And, he doesn't have to compete with football. He's shown that he can get players in there and vie for the NCAA tournament every year. And listen, I kind of think he's kind of wants to hang around because he's just a stone's throw away from UNC. And
that's right.
At the end of his career.
That's it, Naz. He's going to wait for that UNC job to open up. He's a former UNC player. Roy Williams is not getting any younger. When he leaves, depending on where Miller has the UNCG program, he's going to be one of the top candidates for that UNC job.
Yes, he will absolutely be on that short list, and he may forego a little money right now. He could certainly, he's passed up other jobs, but I think he's waiting around for the Carolina Blue.
Number one, I believe, on the top 40 under 40 national coaches. So just certainly a buy, right?
Great job.
Yep.
Timing is everything and context is king. No doubt about that. Lastly, here on NASDAQ, Makur Maker, 5-star prospect from Melbourne, Australia. We all know the story. He chose Howard. He wanted to play at an HBCU instead of going to one of the top Power 5 schools in the country, but it's not going so well for him right now. Stock up, stock down, Makur Maker at Howard.
Listen, buy in Makur Maker. Makur Maker is a portfolio maker. I mean, this is awesome. And listen, his stock is low right now. He's got this nagging groin injury, so we've not been able to see him and buy now because when he gets on the court, he is going to skyrocket. It's going to soar. It's fun to talk about that in a funny sense, but listen, in all seriousness, this is a great kid and a great story. I mean, he chooses an HBCU because he's on a mission. I mean, he's talking about things beyond basketball. I mean, he is really cued into making a difference in social justice, in raising awareness of the quality of the HBCUs. He wants to start a trend of recruits valuing these other programs, the HBCU programs. I mean, I got such respect for this kid. I mean, maturity beyond his years. So listen, he's injured. I don't know. I don't know if he'll stay at Howard or play at Howard. He may go pro. I mean, he's that good. But whatever this kid's doing, buy into it because he's making a difference in the world.
Well,
I'm certainly going to buy him.
Yeah, here's the thing too, Naz. I mean, it's not like he hasn't played well when he's played. I mean, 12 points, 6 rebounds in a couple of ball games. I know Howard's 0-4. They're struggling as a team, but certainly Makur Maker, I mean, there's a lot to like there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This kid, I mean, he's a 5-star and for a reason. I mean, it's not a fluke and people know his game. And so I think wherever and I hope he stays. If he stays, great. If he moves on, he'll have a great following. You just have to love him.
Oh, he's already got a pro body. He's got the long wingspan. Yeah. He's a real presence in the paint. And because of those things, even when you go to a smaller school, we live in the 21st century now. Technology can get you exposure, and he will be seen by the right scouts. I mean, trust me, Caleb Holmesley at Liberty signed a contract with the Washington Wizards, and Liberty didn't necessarily play on a national scale, although Richie has won 29 and 30 games the last 2 seasons, and Caleb Holmesley was a big part of that. But I had a lot of phone calls from NBA scouts asking me about the kid as a person because they considered him, even though he went to Liberty. So it doesn't matter if you go to a blue blood or a Power 5. If you're good enough, they're going to find you.
Yeah, and I'm wondering just in the back of my mind if with Makur Maker's situation, you get this injury and it really reminds you that you are just one play away from maybe a career-ending injury. So I don't know if that may influence him to kind of go pro early. You certainly couldn't fault him if he did, but just a lot there, but just a great story.
That'll wrap it up for NASDAQ, and you may not be any smarter on Wall Street now, but hopefully you know the college basketball headlines a little bit better now. All right, let's move on in the show here, and our next segment is one we like to call Scarborough Fair or Unfair. All right, guys, let's make Simon and Garfunkel proud here. Let's start it off here. Scarborough Fair or Unfair? Shaka Smart has left the Bald Men on Campus Club.
And this is crazy. You look at these pictures. Shaka Smart on top, that's the guy I remember. I lived in Richmond for many years when he was coaching there. I think I was the first person to sit in his brand new seat when he got the job because Kyle Getter, his assistant coach, is a good friend of mine. And we were in his office hanging around, and Shaka walked in. Hey, he was shaved. Every game that he coached, he was shaved. All of a sudden this year, Texas, he's down there and he's got a head full of hair. I'm jealous. So I say it's unfair that Shaka Smart has a head full of hair.
Yeah, Scar, don't get any ideas, man. You look good.
No, I'm keeping it shaved,
That's
Naz.
Right. I think it's unfair that we haven't seen you with the Philly flat top fade.
Hey, you go to YouTube. I got it on there.
Scarborough Fair or Unfair? Judging Power Fives with no preseason experience.
And this is Scarborough Unfair. And we touched on it earlier, but some of these Power Fives who have a lot of young players, it really takes time to gel. And with no preseason, none, no real set schedule, no really set practice times for some of these schools. And, some of these teams like Kentucky have gotten off to a rocky start. And then you have special coaches like Tom Izzo at Michigan State that no matter what, his team always seems to be prepared. And Coach Izzo had COVID-19, but yet his team still finds a way to get off to good starts because he's so used to challenging himself each and every year that when they come to this challenge, it's just another hurdle to overcome, and they do. But for the most part, some of these Power Fives who are off to a slow start, it's kind of unfair to judge them this early in the COVID-19 scenario.
Yeah, we've seen it so many times before. Chemistry makes a huge difference, and when you have none, well, that can also show up too. The next topic here is one that I think's come up a number of times throughout the last decade or so. Scarborough Fair or Unfair? The ACC is no longer the best conference in college basketball.
To me, that's Scarborough Fair. I think it's fair to say that the ACC is no longer just hands down better than everyone else. Now, you look at the Final Four, and yes, Duke has won in the last 5 or 6 years. UNC won a couple. Virginia is the current, and I guess the two-time champion, because we didn't have a championship at all last year in 2020. So you can look at that and say that. But listen, Georgia Tech is in that conference. Wake Forest is in that conference. There are some teams, Clemson, they aren't that great in terms of the Power Five. And Syracuse is way down from where Boeheim had that program 10 to 15 years ago. Pitt lost to St. Francis of Pennsylvania at home by 10. And, Jeff Capel's got that group the last couple of years, and I'm glad he hired his brother Jason, because now I don't have to compete with him to do games at UAB and some of these other places I could drive to. But in all seriousness, I think the Big 12 is just a little bit better. Let's think about it. Kansas, perennial powerhouse. Baylor, top 5 the last 4 or 5 years under Bryce Drew. Oklahoma's very good. And Shaka Smart has Texas playing as well as they played since Kevin Durant walked that campus. So you're looking at a conference in the Big 12. And then don't forget, Texas Tech was in the most recent national championship. So to me, the Big 12 is slightly better than the ACC top to bottom.
All right, let's move on now. Scarborough, fair or unfair? We were talking about Charles Bassey in Western Kentucky earlier. Big Red is the best mascot in college hoops. Big
Red, to me, is the best mascot in college hoops. And look at this picture. Who has a mouth that big? Maybe Stephen A. Smith. But other than him, Big Red is that guy. And I'm around that program a lot. We mentioned Bowling Green in Western Kentucky, but I'm a little biased. But, if you don't agree with me, hit me up on Twitter and tell me who you think. Because other than the Philly fanatic, that is the best mascot I've seen in person.
All right, we're going to go to Scarborough, fair or unfair, and back to the bald men on campus club here. But this time it's Florida State head coach Leonard Hamilton. This man has looked the exact same for decades. Scarborough, fair or unfair?
That is definitely a Scarborough unfair. Listen, I shaved my head, and maybe I look a little younger than I am. I'm not even going to say how old I am. But I'll tell you what, if I'm sitting in this chair 20 years from now, I look exactly like I do today. I want to thank my lucky stars. But right now, it's unfair for Leonard Hamilton to be in his mid-70s looking like that and recruiting young kids at Florida State, and they think he's going to be there forever because, hey, he might. He looks like he's found the fountain of youth. But one of my favorite coaches of all time, Coach Hamilton, shout out.
Yeah, he's got the look is great, but I was going to say he's doing a fantastic job down there at Florida State.
Wow. Yeah, I got to agree, guys. He's done a great job in coaching, and then 72 years old. I mean, my goodness. I don't know how you pull that off. Share the secret. Lastly here, Scarborough, fair or unfair, not having the NCAA tournament in 2020?
Well, that certainly was unfair to so many good teams. You think about, we didn't get any closure. It's a reason. There's a show called Unsolved Mysteries. I never watched that show. You know why? Because they never solved the mystery. If they called it Solved Mysteries, I would have watched every week. And we have a lot of unsolved cases here with Dayton. Would they make the Final Four? We don't know. Obi Toppin was ready to carry them there. Liberty won 30 games and made the tournament, but we didn't have a tournament. San Diego State. Stephen F. Austin won 30 games last year. I wanted to see what happened with some of these stories. So it's very unfair. And the most unfair thing is to the city of Atlanta, because instead of getting the next Final Four, they have to get back in line and they have to bid for the next one. And it's already bid out 8 years. So they're not going to see it for at least another decade or so. So it's a lot of Scarborough unfair with the COVID and NCAA 2020.
Yeah, terrible.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we can all agree on there, unfair, just unfair to the kids, the student athletes, more so than anyone in that. But certainly just a bad situation all the way around. Hopefully we won't have to deal with that again this year. All right, we have reached the home stretch here, and it's time for the final lap. Scar, what league will produce the next national champion in college basketball?
I think I already made my case. Big 12. It's going to be Baylor. It's going to be Kansas. One of those two.
Will Virginia repeat as national champion, Naz?
Well, technically they already have, since there was not a tournament last year, but no, they will not repeat as champion. It has nothing to do with them as a team. They'll have a great year, but it is near impossible anymore for teams to repeat. It will not happen for a long time.
Well, how about this, Scar? This show's about mid-majors. Will we ever see a mid-major national champion one day?
You know, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen soon. When we talked about Dayton and San Diego State, if we consider them mid-majors, which we do for the sake of our show, both of them this past year had a chance to win the national championships. There's a lot of good teams. Somebody's going to be able to put together a stretch of 6 games where they win 6 games and cut down those nets.
All right, well, how about this? Before we get to a mid-major national champion, we saw Virginia lose to a 16 seed just a couple of years ago. Does a 16 beat a 1 again anytime soon?
It's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. I called that one. I didn't know it would be UMBC, but I said it will happen because 15s were beating 2s. Remember that?
Yes.
I said the second they overrank a 1, which I thought Virginia might have been overseeded, and they underseed a 16 where they probably should have got a 15 or 14. Like UMBC was really good that year, and they were playing well late. It was going to happen. It happened. I think it's going to happen again fairly soon.
Yeah, probably fair to say, though, that UMBC was just playing lights out that night, and it just really felt like a perfect storm of circumstances, did it not?
Yeah, and style of play comes into that effect.
It does.
If the committee makes the right connections and sets the right game up, they can set up a storm.
All right, last one, Naz. This one's for you. Will we have an NCAA tournament this year? And if so, where's it going to be? We know it's not going to be in Atlanta.
That's right. Well, yes,
hurts.
We will have a tournament. The NCAA cannot afford not to have a tournament. They can't afford it financially. They can't afford it by just the support. So there will be a tournament. I don't know where. It may be whatever state is open for business.
Get ready.
That's
Get
right.
ready, Naz. They may have to fill in. We may have some eligibility left. You and me will go in there and play.
So location and then teams. Who knows how many teams? It might be whatever teams don't have COVID, but there will be a tournament.
There you go, folks. You heard it here. Naz says there will be a tournament. We sure hope he's right. Well, that's going to wrap up our very first edition of NazScar. We want to thank our guest, former head coach Jeff Meyer, joining us here this week. Also to our producer-engineer, Shaq Cook. For Paul Nazigan, for Tim Scarborough, I'm Nick Pierce. Thanks for joining the NazScar podcast. High-speed action without all the pit stops and crashes, Coming up on the show next week, again, we'll visit with Jeff Meyer. If you want to check out the show on our YouTube page, NazScar Podcast homepage, also find us on Twitter at NazScar Podcast. That is NazScar Podcast, and you can check us out there as well. For everyone here at the show, I'm Nick Pierce. Thanks so much for joining us. So long, everybody.